Hi there! Welcome to our 2025 World Watercolor Month tutorial for July 9th. The prompt for today is home. The prompts have come from Doodle Wash. I'm not affiliated with them, but I thought it would be really fun to make a set of tutorials that were beginner friendly so that everybody could participate in World Watercolor Month. I just love this month. I think it's super fun to fill a journal full of paintings with prompts. It's a great way to challenge yourself, grow your technical skills, or if you're brand new, it's a great introduction to watercolor. All right, so this prompt is home. I'm not going to draw my actual home. Instead, I thought it would be fun to draw sort of a dream spot. I love being in the woods and I love being near water. So I'm going to draw a little A-framed cottage in the woods. In order to do this drawing, it will be easiest if we have something called a vanishing point. And so what a vanishing point means is that all of your lines go towards that spot. And so I'm going to pick our vanishing point as being right about here. I'm going to use a little piece of washi tape to mark that. And then on top of that, I'm going to make a little dot, okay? And so I'm going to start with our cottage, and then after we do our cottage, we're going to build in where the foreground ends, the lake starts. We're going to have some background trees way off in the distance. So, but I think I'm going to do that afterwards. Right, we're going to start with the front is sort of, or very close to head on, but we're going to see this perspective of the side of our little A-frame. And so the first thing to do is to we're going to draw kind of the point of where the top of that roof is, which is going to be right here. And then I'm going to go down. I'm just going to make myself a guideline. I'm going to use this for the doors and windows and things. And so I'm going to draw it right onto my page and I will erase it later. And then I want to draw the kind of the floor, right, the basement level or the ground floor space. And what I'm going to do is just to give it a little perspective, but not necessarily in line with our van, I'm just going to tweak it just a teeny bit. And now I'm going to draw across. Now I'm not going to worry about it being totally even. I'm going to come up, we're going to come up on this point, and you can just hand draw this in. It doesn't have to be. All right, and that is like the little ground level part, right? Because the roof extends over the top of that. So now, from our top point here, we're going to connect this and this. It looks a little like a tent because it's an A-frame. And again, I picked this because this is a very easy shape to draw. Houses and architecture can get pretty complicated, and I wanted to keep this pretty beginner friendly. So that's why we're doing this particular shape for building. Okay, so now I need to see, is my perspective? Okay, so when we talk about vanishing point, the vanishing point is a spot that everything disappears to, right? So that all of my lines go to that in order to create perspective. I think I'm going to move it a bit more over to this side. I think it's a little too close because I think my lines are going to get really steep. Okay, so now this is the side of the roof. I hope this is making sense. Stay with me because if it isn't making sense yet, it should pretty soon. Okay, so we're going to take the bottom of our house, line up the bottom of our corner with our vanishing point, which is right here, and we're just going to draw a line. And then we're going to leave this side on the vanishing point, and we're going to draw another line for this roof overhang. Okay, do you see how they have perspective? Now, for this roof, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to keep our vanishing point here, but we're going to line up with our point here, and we're going to draw another line. There we go. Now we have this perspective of our house or our cute little cabin. The next thing we're going to do is give it some dimension because this is very flat looking. This roof comes forward. And so we're going to take this and just bring it down a little and bring it back there, okay? And now we're going to make a little double line and just hand draw this in. You can use a ruler if you want to, but the thing about hand drawing it in is that we don't want it to be, a little loose. And sometimes when everything is done by ruler, it starts to get very kind of more mechanical looking. And okay, in order for me to draw this, I move my paper around a lot so that I can draw a straight line, because this is naturally just a good way for me to draw a straight line. Oops, there we go. All right, so now we've got this little there. This little there. It's like the fascia board, right? All right. And I'm going to round this a little because I like the idea of having it being a little whimsical here. I'm going to round that a little. And now I'm just going to kind of bring this up here so that it's not perfectly straight. And then this is the back side of my house. And I want this angle to be here. We're going to go here. Here's there we go. Okay, so I'm going to come down here. Do you see how I've come in a little bit because there's an overhang? And then this is going to come up to about here. It's about the same length up here, right? And then we're going to just connect this. Oh, see, I do much better with my straight line if my wrist moves in this direction. So I'm going to move my paper so I can do that. Okay, and now all of this needs to come off because there we go. Now we have a great little perspective drawing of an A-frame. I want to we can continue to use this perspective, these lines, to draw things like a little front porch. So I'm going to start my front porch. My door is going to be right in the center. So I'm just going to come across. And I'm going to bring it down, but there's going to be a few steps, like a step up, and it's going to be kind of wide, like a nice wide welcoming porch, right? And I'm going to bring it down like this, but that looks very flat, so we have to add dimension, right? So let me bring my door down. This is kind of rustic, so we're going to bring a little bit of, right, and there's going to be a nice big kind of board trim over the door. All right, and we're going to erase that line at the end. So to bring my porch forward, I'm going to use this perspective line again, my little vanishing point, and I'm just going to bring forward like this, and then using the same point, keeping my point here and lining up with the back corner of the porch basically here, I'm going to go like this. Now I can erase everything that's underneath of there. And I'm going to see how this line of my house is here. I'm going to bring it, oh, I need to do the bottom one too. Oops. Because it's like, it's raised up. There we go. Right? So now I'm just going to bring a line here. It's not super deep. And see how far this is here? It's going to be the same here. So I'm going to bring it down like that. I hope this is making sense. I hope I'm not going too fast. I'm trying to make these videos not take 5 hours because I realized they were getting quite lengthy. I don't know if people want to watch a tutorial for an hour. Okay. But if we have to include a drawing phase, and I feel like, it's going to take a little bit of time. Okay. It is my solid belief that in order to really progress with watercolor, you have to learn some drawing skills. You can always trace, and tracing is fine, but you want to learn some drawing skills because as you get more advanced and you want to be able to do more things with your paint and your paintbrush, if you don't have an ability to draw something, it's just going to be hard to do that. And people think you have to have natural talent to draw it. You don't. I don't have natural drawing talent at all. I have to work really hard for it. So it's just one of those things that you can develop as an artist. Okay, there we go. Oops, somehow I've got that kind of goofed up. Okay, I erased it and then there we go. All right, so now we have this little porch. Or it's kind of like a little deck. I'm not even going to put any railing on it or anything like that. We've got our door. Let me just darken those lines up a little bit. And I think the most welcoming doors always have a window. So we're just going to add a little window and our little handle. Okay? And now I want an adorable window up here. And it's going to come kind of in the middle, and it's going to go up. And it's not going to be anything fancy. I'm just going to make basically a rectangle, and then I'm going to make an outer rectangle for my trim, because we're going to have this kind of rustic-y trim. These little details are part of what bring these drawings to life. And then I'm not going to have a window on both sides because I think I'm going to do like a little potted something here maybe. So I'm going to leave room for that. But I am going to do a window on this side. And it's going to be kind of in line. It's going to be a little lower. And you know what? These like little old cottages, they were hand built a lot of times and things didn't line up and they weren't perfectly symmetrical in the way that houses are today. So we're gonna kind of roll with that. All right, so this is my cottage. It's done. What a cute little place to be. We could add a fireplace if we wanted to, but I think we're gonna keep it simple. Okay, so the next thing is going to be to create our ground. So it's kind of on a hill, like I said before. So what we're gonna see is it's gonna be, like this, and then it's gonna kind of come up. All right, and then in the background, we're going to see the water. So that's where that line is going to be. We're going to paint some water back there. There's going to be trees too. And then we're going to see, so this is the hill in the foreground. This is where the water sits down lower. This is the shoreline. And then there's going to be some trees against that other shoreline. Okay, there we go. And we are going to add trees here, but I'm not going to draw them in. We're going to just be really free flowing with this. Okay, we are ready to start painting. If you need to pause and get caught up, you can. If you want to screenshot this and color the back and transfer it to your paper, that's okay too. If you don't feel ready to draw this and you would rather work that way, then by all means, you do what you need to do to enjoy the process. Okay, we are going to make our cottage, what color? I think we're going to make it like I think we're going to make the cottage white because that doesn't seem right. I don't know. Let me think about that. We're going to paint the background while we think about what color to make the cottage. Maybe green. I think we're going to make it green. Okay, I'm going to get my big brush, my size 14, and we're going to paint this up with the water and sky color. And so I don't know that we've really worked on sky, so this will be a good opportunity for that. I'm gonna move this over and make sure that you can see everything. Let me double check here. Yep, okay. For my sky and water, we are going to use our French ultramarine. But that's a really, really blue. And this is all in the distance and it's kind of grayed out. Sometimes what's in the distance gets a little kind of purpley almost. So I'm going to add a bit of my quinacridone rose. And so let me just mix this over here. So you see it's just a little bit of pink in that blue. Now this pile is not quite big enough. I want to make sure that I can paint in. I'm going to add some more water. I want it to be really, really light because our cottage is going to have some color to it. This we just want to fade into the background. Okay, so now we're just going to start up here and just go all the way down. Just pull it down. Don't paint over the top of the house though. Just paint over the top of the background trees and in the lake. And you see how I'm when you're doing the sky, you want it to be nice and smooth. But as we get to this lake, if it's a little rougher, that's okay. All right, so now we're gonna leave that. Let's see, sort of. Okay, we're gonna leave the front till later. We're gonna work on these trees. And so the way that you can make, they're gonna be like a blue-gray with a little bit of green. So I'm gonna go back to that same blue, which is my French ultramarine. And I'm gonna add in some of my sap green, right, which gives us a nice color, but I'm going to add just a touch of pink because I want to gray it out. And so when we add that touch of pink, it adds this gray color, and that's what we're looking for. But I might leave, okay, here's what I'll do is I might leave a little bit of more the green color right here, and I might mix some of that in. Okay, because we want it to look like trees off in the distance. All right, this is still wet and we want it to be still wet because we want this to flow in. So we're just going to take our blue-green mix and we're just going to paint like this at the edge of the shore and from the house, and we're going to go up into that tree line, right? And then same thing over here. You should get a nice hard edge by the house because there's no water on the house, but up at the top of your trees, it should be softening because your paper was wet. And if your paper isn't wet enough, we can add, if it's dried, you know, like I can see mine is drying a little bit over here. One of the things we can do is soften it up. So I'm just gonna go, like this was wet over here, but I guess this side is not as wet. So I'm just gonna drop my brush in my water. I'm gonna take a lot of water off because I don't want to over flood it or I'm gonna have all sorts of backwashes. So it's just, I'm just gonna use a little water and I'm just gonna kind of hit the top of this so that it flows a bit. Okay, and I just want it to be a little fuzzy. Now I'm gonna take some of that green, that more green color, and I'm just gonna kind of dip it in a few spots. Just give it a little variation. Like I said, ideally that paper is all still, the sky is still wet when you do that, but do you see how it's kind of nice and soft here? That's what we want. This is off in the distance. Okay, now our water, we're gonna leave alone. We're not gonna do much more than that. We are gonna paint our foreground with more green. So we're gonna mix up some green, but I wanna leave some of that blue. Okay, so I've got my green. I'm gonna leave some blue. There we go. And we've got our green. I'm gonna add a little bit more water. There we go. All right, so see how I have a variety of colors to pull from? That's excellent. And we are going to start with the, let's start with the back. So we're going to start with the back and we're going to start with that slightly darker color at the back. And then we're going to work our way forward into that slightly lighter color. And we're just going to move around our house. And these are just making some big general washes. And I might even add a teeny bit of yellow to my green mix for that very front. And what that does is it creates this like warmer, this is where I'm standing right now. I'm kind of leave that up to the house. Oftentimes it's, we see how we're creating distance just by the colors we're using. Nothing is darker or lighter in terms of value, but we've got cooler colors in the background off in the distance and warmer colors up front. And so it just helps to develop that perspective. Now we are going to let this dry all the way because the next thing we want to do is add some trees, and we're going to paint in the details on our house. But we want it to be dry because if we paint right now, there's too much wet and everything's gonna start bleeding and flooding. So I'm gonna put it on pause and I'll see you in maybe 20 minutes to finish this painting up. All right, everything is dry. Before we start painting our little A-frame house, I'm just gonna lighten mine up a bit because I don't want to have those shine through quite as much. Leave them dark enough that you can see them, but light enough that they don't stand out too much. All right, we are going to paint the house. You're gonna want a smaller brush for this. So I'm going to grab my size, ooh, let's see. I like my size 4. This is my 5. There it is. I'm gonna use my size 4. I think I'm gonna paint my house. I was thinking green, I was thinking teal, but maybe yellow, red, I don't know. It could be brown. I want you to pick the color that you wanna paint your house, and we're only painting in this little part. The roof is gonna be brown, so pick a color that goes well with brown. And maybe we can start with the roof. Let's start with the roof. Okay, so we're gonna pick, I'm going to use two browns. No. I'm going to use my favorite color combination ever. I'm going to use my burnt sienna. Here, I hope you can see that. So I'm going to use my burnt sienna. I need to get a little more water in here. And then my French ultramarine as my kind of shadowy space. because that'll make it nice and gray. I'm just adding a little bit of water. Okay. Oops, sorry about that. That's terribly annoying. Belly, no thanks. No barking. Okay. All right. Sorry about that. I hope that didn't hurt your ears. I don't know if I can. If I knew how to video edit, I would pull that out, but I don't, so you're probably going to have to hear it. Okay, so I've got a nice pile of my burnt sienna. That's pretty warm, but we're going to grab our little bit of French ultramarine, and that's going to gray it out. And I'm going to start off with painting everything like this little line here. And this little line. Just draw it nice and straight. So I'm getting a nice even line by just pulling it straight. I had to pull and lift, otherwise I tend to get a little too wide. You can practice that on a side piece of paper if you want. Now I'm going to mix in some of that French ultramarine to just kind of darken it up. And I'm going to start at the back here. And the reason I'm starting at the back is because I'm not going to quite touch what I just painted, because it'll blend. And if I've got some texture. Right now we're brushing wet on dry. Kind of like that texture. I'm going to get a little bit more blue in here in some parts. And we're just going to fill that in. And the reason, oops, if you go too far, go ahead and go like that. The reason that I'm pulling it this way is because shingles tend to be horizontal. And so that I have these little like skippy parts. And it gives it a little texture. I like that. I'm going to add a little bit more of the, ooh, that was a lot more. That's okay. There we go. I'm just going to darken that up, and I want to darken that up towards here a little bit. I want there to be kind of a, I don't want it to be perfectly, what I'm looking for is this kind of, gosh, I don't know. I've got some big bangs happening outside. I don't know if they're like 4th of July fireworks. They're bothering my dogs for sure. There. Okay. I'm going to just draw this nice and straight. I'm going to make this really dark. So this little tiny corner in the back is going to be like a darker gray. And I'm going to move my paper to do that so that I have a nice straight line. I'm just going to kind of pull it like this. And all of the roof is wet enough that that's just going to kind of bleed in and create a darker spot back there. I'm just going to kind of tip it in there. And I'm going to kind of, I'm not making shingles first, but I'm just kind of tipping in some of that darker color just to give it some shingly style texture. I'm kind of paying attention to the perspective line. All right, I'm gonna leave that like that. I'm pretty happy with that. It's got some texture, it's not super flat. I've got this lighter section on the front. I'm really happy with that. My porch is going to be a deck, so I'm gonna do the same thing. And on this back side, where it's a little darker, I'm just gonna come in. My light is coming like this, so the things over here are going to be darker, and the things that are facing here are going to be lighter. That's part of how we're going to get our dimension. Make it look 3D instead of flat. I'm going to paint the front of my porch. Now for this top part, the sun is actually up in the sky, right? So it's coming, so this is where it's going to be brightest. So what I'm going to do is get a really washed out version of that burnt sienna here. Oh, somehow I've got some pink in there. Your palette goes a little like, I think I had it in the crease. All right, there we go. If you need to, just wipe away part of your palette so that you have a clean spot. There, that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for this really washed out version because I'm just gonna come in here. Do you see how like by giving it shadow, and I'm gonna, a little bit in this corner is a little darker. There. You see how now it looks like something that's a raised up platform. It gives it dimension because we're thinking about where the sun would be shining. I'm still thinking on the color of this. I think, oh, should we make it yellow? Let's make it yellow. I'd love to make a yellow house. All right. I'm going to come over here. It's going to be yellow, but it's going to be kind of a soft, washed out yellow. It's not going to be a super bright yellow. And then my doors and trim can be like a pretty blue. Yellow and blue is so pretty together. So what I'm going to do is take my yellow. I'm just using my medium yellow here, which is what I usually start with. And I don't know if you can see. I want to make sure. There you go. So I've got a nice pile of yellow here. And I'm going to just scoop in a bit of that pink. And it's going to make it like this soft golden color. Now, in order to give it a little more neutral, I'm going to come in here. I'm mixing up, it's a dirty palette, right? But that's okay. Do you see how that really like chills it out? And that's what we want to do. I'm going to add a little more yellow back in. A little bit of that pink there. It's like this kind of creamy, more neutral color. And it's really watered down, and that's what I want. I'm going to pull some water out of my brush, but I want a really diluted, very soft color. And so now I'm just going to paint in here. Yeah, I'm happy with that choice. All right, and I'm going to paint over the top of my trim because it's all going to get darker. So I'm not going to worry about that, but I am not going to paint over the top of my windows. And what I'm trying to do is, you don't want to get, like when you're painting in shapes like this, you want them to be nice, and if you want them to be nice and smooth, sometimes we don't. You want to keep moving. Do you see how I keep moving? And I'm making sure that no edge is sitting and drying. I'm keeping my brush moving between the different parts, and I kind of start in one way and I work my way down the other to keep my edges wet and soft, and then I don't get any weird hard lines. Okay. Oh, that's really cute. I'm glad I went with yellow. Now this is going to be super shaded because it's underneath of this roof. And so we're going to get a nice dark yellow, and I'm going to pull in some of this brown that I used on the roof, which also has some blue in it, right? And so it's almost like a deep golden color. And we're just going to come under here. This is where my corner is, and I'm just going to paint that like that. Okay. Now you see how we have some really nice dimension developing. I'm super happy with that. We would have a little bit darker color. I'm going to kind of mix. So now I'm going to mix between the two. I have this darker color and this lighter color. I'm going to mix those up so I have kind of an in-between. I'm going to pull some off my brush by just patting it here, or you can pat it on a paper towel. And I'm going to come in and just add a little tiny shadow line here. And I'm going to soften that out without too much water, because, and then I'm going to do the same thing up in this peak, because this peak is kind of sitting back, right? And then we're just going to kind of brush it out and soften it. There. And so we're just adding a little bit of extra dimension. After this all dries, the underside of this roof would, because it's hanging forward a little bit, would be really dark. So we'll draw underneath of that a really fine line. You could do that with a marker too. We don't have to do it with a brush. For now, we're going to let this dry because I don't want to have anything bleeding in. That part of the house is done. The next thing we're going to work on is painting. We're in the woods, so we see all this great lake, right? But we want to see the woods so we're going to kind of erect some woods around us. I'm going to get my size 6 brush for this, and what we're going to do is create some trees. I'm going to get a nice big pile of my sap green. Okay, and then I'm going to add the same pretty yellow that I use. This is my Azo Yellow Medium, and this is, most of my colors here are Daniel Smith, but I've got some Rembrandt. This is a Rembrandt color, and I just love it. All right, and I'm just gonna, I need some more water there. Okay, a nice pile of that. And then the other thing that we're gonna mix into this is our, I'm just gonna mix it into this spot here, is our French ultramarine. There was a little bit of gray in there, but that's okay. Okay, so now we have 3 big piles for our trees. What we're gonna do is we're gonna create a tree shape that is off the page. These trees are so tall that you can't see all of them, right? And they're gonna be like big kind of oval shaped trees. And what we wanna do is think about that there is light coming this way, right? And so you wanna think about that there's like a circle here, you know, like trees have like, I don't want to say groupings, but where a branch comes out, there's a thicker, denser grouping of leaves. And so I'm using my yellowy part because we're starting with the lightest, right? And so so we've got some, like this is a grouping. We've got a grouping, and we're just going right on top of everything else, and we've left it fairly, I'm going to add a little more green in here because as we get to the bottom, it's a little more shaded. I'll probably go back and forth and mix a little yellow in. Okay. And this is going to dip right behind the house. So I'm going to take it right to the edge of the house. And if I need to, I can wipe it off a little bit, right? Okay, there we go. So that's my first tree. And it's just, all I'm doing is tapping my brush around and making sure that I leave spaces. And I'm thinking about like, okay, there's a limb here, there's a limb here, kind of thinking in that way. I'm trying not to make it so symmetrical because it wouldn't be. And now what we're gonna do is grab a bit more of our medium green, right, which is just that kind of sap green without anything in it. And we're gonna tip around in the kind of lower half of these. And this is called charging. We're charging this color into the wet paint that we just painted. Like we painted that yellow and now we're charging this darker green into that yellow. And it makes this like soft wash. Sometimes people, when you're starting, you have the tendency to want to fill in the whole tree, and that's just not how trees look. Okay, now the very darkest part of the tree tends to be towards the middle and bottom, at least in this case because it's behind the house. So we're going to get some of our blue and I'm going to mix it in. I like to have a fairly intense blue on my trees because I just think it keeps them really interesting. And we're just going to come into the middle here and to the lower parts. Remember that these are like dimensional balls of leaves. And so the sun is getting to the top part but not the bottom part. So we're going to kind of tip in that blue down on the bottom. And it tends to be more dense towards the center, so I'm going to kind of connect some of that. There we go. All right, I'm pretty happy with that. That looks really, I'm really happy with that. We're going to let this dry a little, and we're going to work on a tree next to this. And the one next to it is just as tall, but we're going to leave it a little space. I need a little more yellow here, and we're just going to leave some space in between so that you can see that this is a second tree, that it's not the same one. Right, their trees, they might touch a little here and there, but they're not going to touch everywhere. And as I kind of correct my shape, sometimes I'm like, ooh, that's getting a little too like stripy. So I want to come back in and maybe come a little thicker here. Okay, now we're going to charge in with our green, kind of towards the middle. When I charge in, I don't have a lot of water in my brush because I don't want to, there we go. I don't want to overpower things. And we're going to come forward. This one's going to come forward here. Okay, and now let's grab our really nice dark blue that's got our French ultramarine mixed in. And let's just hit that center. Yeah, there we go. Okay, now we're going to make another tree on this side. Same method. Start with our yellowy green, and we're just going to, I'm going to do just one big one here, and it's going to be a little like, if you imagine the stem is kind of right behind the house where you can't really see it. So I'm going to, this is like where the center is. And again, these trees are so tall that you can't see the tops. And I'm just, here's like another one of my, be careful not to get on top of the house. This is why it's so important for everything to be dry when we start. Okay, and we are going to pull in our, because if anything was wet and we're dancing around, it's just going to smoosh right in, and we don't want that to happen. Okay, so now we're going to just kind of tip in our green. And you might be saying, but Stacy, what happens? You can see that water behind them. Yeah, because if you were looking at the trees, you would be able to see that water. All right. The sky and everything, it peeks through. These trees are not so dense that you wouldn't be able to see stuff. So let's get that nice blue color, and we're going to just have that go down the center and a little bit out. Definitely here. Okay. And I'm pretty happy with that. I have a little bit more there. Okay, where we've got like a harsh line like that, you can kind of cover that line up by adding some darker colors. Okay, so we want to add in our trunk and our kind of shadows from where the trunks were, or would sit on the ground, because there would be a little bit of shading underneath that tree. But I don't want to do it when they're all the way dry, but I also don't want to do it when they're soaking wet, because if we draw a dark color down the middle right now, it's just going to explode out. I want it to bleed a little bit because I want it to be a little soft. I just don't want it to be super wet. Oops. Just wipe that off. A little sloppy with my water there. Okay, so while we are waiting for those trees to dry just a little bit, oops, I'm going to go ahead and paint in the color of my door. We're going to do our trim last. We're going to do our door and actually, yeah, that's what we're going to do. Okay, so my door is going to be blue. Or my door is it going to be blue? What color do I want my trim to be? Okay, I'm talking out loud, but that's okay. Maybe my door is going to be, yeah, I really love a blue door. It's going to be blue. And it's going to be my trusty favorite. There we go. I'm just going to paint these in right around. I'm going to be really careful. Just paint right around where my window is. And all the way down to your porch. There. Okay, I'm going to let that sit. And now we'll hit the 3 windows later. Let's go ahead and do our trunks. So I'm going to take my burnt sienna. Do you see how I'm using the same colors over and over again? What that does for your painting is it just keeps it really unified. If we pull too many colors in, it starts to get a little crazy. All right, and I'm going to add in my French ultramarine to get this really nice dark color. And we're just going to go back to this first tree. And we're going to kind of draw the tree stem down. I'm not going to hit it in every spot, but I'm going to kind of go like that. I'm just going to get a little wider here. Okay, and you see how it's still wet enough that it's going to kind of flood out in some places. This tree isn't quite as tall. You can see like here, it's still wet, so it's doing a little like, yeah, it's dispersing, it's softening, but that's kind of cool. And then we're going to bring it down here and there. These are some kind of evergreeny style tree. Now what I like to do for this ground is pull out some of the color from the actual trees, and I'm just going to kind of like brush where that is, right? And I'm gonna kind of connect it back here. Everything's just gonna get really soft. And then if I want to, I can add a little bit more darkness here. My trunks I tend to do this when my trunks are still wet, because then it does some, I'm gonna kind of join that together because it's a little icky there. Like, we're just gonna kind of muddle this corner up, right? Because there, just softens everything, and we can see there. All right, I love it. And then sometimes I just kind of bring it there. This is interesting that way. Okay, I'm going to stop. I'm going to pull that out a little. I use my fingers a lot to pull at the paint. There. All right, and I'm going to go back into my brown and just go like this. There. All right, now let's do this trunk. This was the last tree we painted, so it might be still a little wet, but not too wet. And we're going to just start with our trunk. I'm just kind of pulling. If you can see, like, I'm not painting it in every spot. And if I get a little, like, sometimes I can be a little too symmetrical about things. And then if I need to, I'll just, like, pull it up like I just did. Okay, so this tree is actually, the trunk is behind the roof of the house. So I'm gonna keep this. This will be opaque enough that it covers up. There we go. And I'm just gonna make sure that my line of my trunk, bottom of my trunk, follows the edge of that house. Okay, now I'm still gonna put my shadow in, because it's still a tree that's shadowy, right? So I'm going to grab this darker color, and I'm just going to take it right here. And let's just pull it out a little. Actually, what would be interesting is to kind of pull it this way. And almost not, oops, dog hair, kind of define. And the reason I'm pulling it down like this is what you can see is that I'm kind of defining a path a little bit. It just brings your eye here. We're creating lines that bring your eye here. And we can do the same here. We can kind of like come in. It's more like composition-y things, right? Because we're going to kind of bring our color in like this. And by bringing it up to the, see how I'm bringing it up to that green? The yellow of my house. When you do that, you are uniting so that it doesn't look like it's floating. I do this a lot in paintings where I take two things that wouldn't really be joined, but then somehow kind of join them later. And I'm just gonna kind of, there. Now just creating some lines because I want them to go up though. There. Kind of unites everything and it just softens stuff. And now I do want to go in and create a darker shadow here. There. Okay, we're going to leave that alone. Look at our little A-frame cottage in the woods. It's so cute. The last thing we're going to need to do is paint our trim and our windows, and then we're going to add a little darkness underneath of that roof there because that's going to give it some more dimension. Just some more, like, it's going to make it pop out. So for the trim, I think my trim is going to be painted in the same color that the roof is, just because it's like, it's wood. So I'm going to use my raw sienna with a little bit of that blue. I think it'll look nice next to that blue door as well. And by adding that French ultramarine, it just takes some of the, just kind of tones this down a bit, which is nice. All right, I need a little more water because I don't have quite enough, but I don't want too much water. I want to be really careful about not using too much water here. I want just enough water for the paint to flow out of my brush, but I don't want it to be so watery that I am having trouble controlling it. And I'm just going to come at the top of my window, and I'm going to paint the board like this and like this. Right, and the reason that I'm going to do them separately like that is because here, same thing for the top here, I can get them all nice and even. And by painting them this way, now I can rotate my paper this way and I can do the same. And it's gonna look like 4 pieces of trim board as opposed to me having outlined the window. I'm just gonna draw a line, you know. And it's okay if you leave a little space, because if you leave a little space, you're just like giving a little more definition. Okay. Oops. All right. Oh, while I have it sideways, we are going to grab a super dark. I'm going to add my French ultramarine, but a really dark version of my French ultramarine with my really thick, you know, raw sienna. And I'm going to do that to get this really dark, almost dark gray, but with a little bit of a brown tone. Okay, and then this I'm going to take right along the underside of this. I'm just going to do the most gentle line. This is hard to do, so go slowly. You can use a black pen if you don't feel confident with your brush. Like if you don't feel like you're going to be able to brush that and you think, oh my gosh, I'm going to wreck it, don't do that. Just go ahead and take a black marker. And then I'm going to do the same under here. This is a little wet, so when that dries, I'm going to do the same thing under here. Maybe I'm going to do it now. I'm going to do it now. If it bleeds a little, that's okay. Okay, there we go. That's just going to give me some nice dimension. And I'm going to add a little bit. Okay, only do this if you're really confident. I'm going to add a little bit to the bottom of each piece of trim because it just gives them a little more dimension. Again, this is something that you want to be really careful with because you don't want to, you work so hard on stuff, you don't want to wreck it. And I'm going to do the same on this side of the door. Do you see how that's just adding a three-dimensional look? But I'm being so careful. Pen works fine too. Okay, so now I've just added some more dimension. If we want to, we can do that here. Right. Just in this corner, just to give some darkness. Paintings need value. They need some really dark parts of the painting because when you look at things, there are dark parts. I think oftentimes we are afraid to go too dark when we're painting, and so don't be afraid of that. All right, let's paint in the windows. We'll want to wait for things to dry a bit because we don't want to have that bleed in. So let's see. While we're waiting for that to dry, is there anything else we need to do? I don't think so. I think we're really just going to leave this. This looks like it's floating a little, but I'm just not going to be that picky. Actually, I think it's fine. Okay, we could paint like a cute little pot of something, but if you want to, like we could get a terracotta. It would be easy. Let's do that. Okay, while we're waiting for the other stuff to dry, we're just going to do something extra fun. I'm going to grab my quinacridone rose, and I'm going to mix it in. I have all this yellow here from before when I was doing the house. I'm going to mix it in with that yellow to create a nice terracotta. There we go. Okay, and I'm just going to do a little pot, and it's just going to be basically a little rectangle here. That's it. Oh, mine's a little watery. If you ever have a, if that happens to you, go ahead, get some. I just need some more paint. There we go. It needs to be a little more intense because we're painting on the top of something. All right, now we're just going to paint a little square. Let's wait for that to dry. Okay. Let's paint in our windows while we wait for our little pot to dry. I'm going to do a, if you look at windows, oftentimes they're grayish black, unless there are lights on in the house. Our lights aren't on right now because we're maybe down enjoying the lake. That's what we're going to kind of think of. And so I'm going to just grab from this like bluish gray set of colors. My palette's kind of dirty, and so it's really easy to just kind of mix up what's on your palette to get this kind of dirty gray. And our sun is coming in like this, so my windows is just going to kind of, I'm going to leave some white, right, because there's a reflection of the sun. And I'm going to do that for all of them, all three. And then if you want to, you can make a little darker spot in a corner just to kind of say, hey, like, There's a little shadow there. I'm going to use kind of a bluey color. I'm just kind of messing with the paint that's already on my palette. And I'm just going to kind of get a little darker area in a few spots. And this got a little too dark, so I'm just going to pull it back out again. There we go. All right. Now, as soon as this dries, it's getting there, we're going to take our green with a little bit of yellow. We're going to do our bush the same way, our little pot plant here. This is going to be like, a little kind of, we're just going to teeny brush it, right? And bring it down. Don't let it touch the, this is kind of like a Norfolk Island pine. That's exciting. Now I'm going to add some green in there because we've got some yellow. We're just going to touch some green in. And just like our tree, we're going to be darkest in the center because that's where it's dense. So I'm going to grab my blue. Now this is really tiny, so if I go in while it's really wet and I have this blue-green, it's just going to spread all over. So I have to let it dry a little before I tip in. It's called charging, before we charge in any more color. So we're just going to let it like, you can hit it with a hairdryer if you want to. Okay, when it's ready, we're just going to tip in just a little towards the center and maybe towards the side, right? Because we've got our light coming in there. There, now we've got a cute little pot. And if I want to get super fancy, I'll take my darker brownish color on the roof, right? And I'm just going to run that along the bottom of this pot because it just gives it a little extra dimension. Just getting some shadows in there. Okay, I think we're done. This looks like a lovely little cottage that would be great to live in. Thanks for joining me for this tutorial, and I'll see you tomorrow for July 10th, which I think is turtle, so that should be fun. Thanks for watching.